Hey guys, welcome back. This will be the last of the new stuff that we can expect to see before we have a quiz on some of this. We've gotten to the point where we've graphed a quadratic function. We've looked at all the special characteristics of it. We've even used our calculator to figure out some of the special characteristics. And now we're going to do one last thing today, and it's actually pretty simple. It's called graphing with a restricted domain. Now, you might be saying to yourself, I don't know what a restricted domain is. What does that mean? Well, a restricted domain just simply means that you're only going to graph that particular function for certain values of x. Okay, now you can see here the way that it's written, it's kind of got this strange look to it. But right here, what I just circled tells us what values of x we are going to be using in our table, and only those values. Now, if you read this inequality, it says x is greater than or equal to -2 and x is less than or equal to 2. This part at the beginning is just a fancy way of saying when x is, and then it goes on to tell you what the values of x could be. So when you see this inequality here, it's going to tell you what values of x that you're going to be using. So here's the minimum value, and here's the maximum value, and you use all the values in between. So if we were to set up a table for this, we'd only be using the values from -2 to 2. So -2, that should say -1 here. I don't know why it says -0. I guess I messed those up. So -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Those would be the values you'd use in your table. So if I were to make a table, my table would only contain these values here. And then we look up on our graphing calculator what the values of y are. But that's what this means, okay? It limits the values. It restricts them. That's where it gets the name restricted domain. It restricts the values of x that we're allowed to use. Okay, that's it. So let's see how this works. We'll actually graph a quadratic with a restricted domain. Then you'll practice for your homework, and then that'll be it. I mean, it's really just more practice with graphing a quadratic, but with this sort of new idea to it. Okay, it says graph the following quadratic over the domain. Now, a domain just means the x values. Keep that in mind. That was from earlier in the year. We learned about that word domain. It just means the x values. So the x values are going to go from -1 to 3. So I can actually start to fill out my table because I only want the values from -1 to 3. So -1, not -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Those are the only values that we're using for this one. Now, if you notice, the equation is -2x squared plus 4x plus 3. So before I go to my graphing calculator, I want to talk about a couple of things. Number one, because it's negative here, I know that this graph is going to be pointing downwards. We haven't seen too many of those, but I know that that'll be the case. Therefore, this thing has a maximum value to it. I didn't ask you to find any of those things or anything like that, but, just something to think about before we go to graph it. Okay, I'm going to open up my graphing calculator here. Let me go to my y equal to cleared off. I'm going to type in negative. Let me use my cursor here. -2 x squared plus 4x plus 3. Now, again, I can look at the graph, get an idea of what it's supposed to look like. Yep, it's pointing down like we thought it would. But what I really want to do is I just want to go to the table. And I want to get the values from -1 up to 3. And -1 is -3. Oh, shoot. I should probably remember them before I have it go away. All right, -3, 3, 5. Okay. 0 is 3, 1 is 5, 2 is 3, and 3 is -3. You still get that nice sort of symmetrical pattern to your y values, but that's it. We're not graphing anymore. So let me graph this. -1, -3, there's one of them. 0, 3, that's up here. 1, 5, that's here. 2, 3, that's right over here. And then 3, -3, that's here. Now, here's another very important piece to this thing. Because we're only graphing these points, when we go to connect our parabola, we need to start at that first point and end at that last one. And we do not want any arrows, because arrows would indicate that this graph went on. This isn't going on. It's starting and stopping. So our graph has to look like that. If you put arrows on it, we're going to have to take off, because that means that you don't understand that this graph starts and stops somewhere. Okay? All right. Well, there you have it. That is graphing with a restricted domain. Nothing fancy to it other than you're just limited on the values that you can use for your table. Okay? Good luck. You're going to practice with this tonight.